Sarah Crom. I'm the Senior Transportation Planner with the Space Coast Transportation Planning Organization. And welcome to Getting Off the Gas, Effective Strategies for Reducing VMT. So, the East Central Florida Regional Resilience Collaborative is currently developing the region's first integrated climate action plan. And through that, they have developed four focus areas: sustainable communities and transportation, energy, agriculture, and natural systems. As part of the development of the action plan, they have developed a webinar series called Driving Change. These are supposed to be action-oriented workshops and are excellent opportunities for you as community members to help engage and add to the action plan. Later in the webinar, Adrian is going to be dropping in the Sustainable Communities and Transportation section of the action plan. And so we encourage you to review. Now, to kick off our webinar, I would like to introduce Billy Hadaway, the Senior Advisor for ETM, for our first presentation. Billy?
Good morning, Sarah, and good morning, all. It's great to be here. This is subject matter that I'm very passionate about, and it ties directly into reducing VMT and supporting other modes of transportation. Um, this title that I use, I've been using for some time. I first came up with the idea of having a discussion about the importance of the integration of land use and transportation, but all my colleagues said that's not a very interesting title. So I came up with placemaking because it's really about placemaking. If we want transit to work, if we want to reduce congestion, if we want to reduce driving, placemaking or compact development patterns are really critical to that. So let's move on. So I've been using this slide for a pretty long time. I was going to USF over in Tampa one day, and back when I went to this speak over there, this young woman was walking her twins on Fowler Avenue near the USF campus because we had no sidewalks on the state road system at that time. Thankfully now we've come a long way we had come a long way at DOT with not just putting sidewalks on new capacity, but also retrofitting. So we now have sidewalks in this location. Next slide. The reason why land development patterns have such a huge role in vehicle miles traveled is that if you think about the land development patterns, there's two types of land development patterns, and what's on the upper half of this slide is what we've been doing since around the end of World War II, which is when most of Florida grew. First of all, we had separated land uses, unlike the way things were done before World War II. So you have a subdivision with just single family homes. You've got apartment complexes maybe to the left of that, and then some kind of office building. And then everything was literally cul-de-sac onto the arterial system, either the federal or the state highway system, because there's free money and there's no connectivity between these development patterns. So every trip has to go out onto the road. And because the single family homes have no other amenities, they have to go out onto the arterial system to go to the doctor's office, to get to school, on and on. If you contrast that with the lower half of that slide, which is how our cities grew up, the city of Tampa is a good example. We have a gridded network of streets. All the uses were fairly well integrated into the communities. And because we have this extensive network of streets and because there's connectivity, if a road gets congested for some reason, there's lots of other ways to get around. And so this is fundamental to the issues that we have from a congestion and safety standpoint. We can't really fix this transportation system effectively if we don't deal with the adjacent land use. Next slide. This is a good illustration of that. These two homes that are in the lower right-hand corner, they're labeled A and B. The backs of these homes are only 70 feet apart, but because there's no connectivity between these two subdivisions, if someone in house A wanted to visit someone in house B, other than jumping over the fence, they would have to drive, literally would have to drive 7 miles to get from the one point to the other. And the thing that really impressed was really impressed upon me when I was at the city of Orlando. This is actually in Orange County outside the city. But I thought to myself, what about all the delivery services nowadays? What about fire? What about city maintenance? If we're serving one neighborhood, then now you've got this circuitous trip to get to the other subdivision because again, from a land development standpoint, we have not been requiring connectivity between neighborhoods, which is really interesting. Contrasting to that, I lived in Houston back in 85 through 87 in a brand new subdivision, and they required the streets in our subdivision to be stubbed out to the adjacent property so that there would be connectivity between these neighborhoods when the next developer came in. Next slide. And the result of that, going back to 2011, the Smart Growth America and the National Complete Streets Coalition came out with a Dangerous by Design report in 2011. And that's when I was hired back to DOT by the secretary to lead the safety initiative. And if you'd go to the next slide. And this is why. Now we're the second worst state in the country for people walking. Back when 2011, when that report came out, we were first, and it's not because we've gotten better, it's because other places have gotten worse. You can see New Mexico is now number one. Back then, we had 4 of the 5 most dangerous regions, metropolitan regions in the entire country. Next slide. And you can see, unfortunately, we've not made a whole lot of progress. This is 8 out of the top 20 nationally in terms of dangerous for pedestrian based on the rates of fatalities per 100,000 people. Next slide. And this is the real challenge. It's a speed management problem. And because so much of our network are high-speed arterials, the speeds on those roads, which may be posted at 45, but people are driving 55 and 60. And sometimes I've seen people in the Tampa area driving 70 miles an hour in a 45-mile-an-hour posted speed limit. And you can see the exposure to pedestrians based on speed. If you get hit at 40 miles an hour, which used to be the DOT's lowest design speed, your chances of being killed are 9 out of 10. And if you happen to survive, chances are you're going to end up with a life-changing injury that is going to significantly affect your quality of life. And think about 30 miles an hour. I think that's the statutory speed limit for a lot of the suburban neighborhoods throughout our state. And so it's no wonder why parents don't want their kids to walk to school because they know that there's a risk with people driving if they were complying with the speed limit. The second thing you can see on here is what happens to your vision as you increase speed, your brain's ability to process what's in front of you gets reduced over speed. Next slide. So where do we go from here? We've always thought, well, we can solve these problems. We just need more money. And I put this slide in quite some time ago when I was in District 5 back in the mid 90s. 94 actually, the secretary came back in 94 and said, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is the gas tax at the federal level was just increased. The bad news is it's projected to be bankrupt in 10 to 15 years. It was 14 years actually that it went bankrupt, and it's been subsidized to the tune of $275 billion out of general funds, not out of the federal gas tax. So that's a declining revenue source. The state gas tax is indexed to inflation. 2 years ago, the secretary at the time was projecting, based on Department of Revenue sources, that it would plateau in this year and then start declining because of increased fuel efficiency and EVs and other things. That has been moved out a couple of years. But again, both the federal and state gas tax are not sustainable over the long time. And then at the local level, that is controlled by the legislature. It has not been increased since 93. It's not indexed to inflation. So the only other source is impact fees, which has to be spent on capacity. It cannot be spent on operating and maintenance. So you have to have a local option sales tax for infrastructure or transportation. And those have failed in Orange and Hillsborough counties over the last few years. And that's what locals really need to maintain the system over time. Next slide. So there's other implications to these development patterns, and the more sprawl we have, the more cost that there's going to be to operate and maintain the system. But there's also serious safety implications, and I consistently am trying to get people to use the term crash instead of accident. So is DOT, because these are avoidable. Next slide. And at the same time, we need to be very transparent. We need to use language that the public understands. And while we in the transportation world are guilty of calling every transportation change to the system improvement, there's also many times negative consequences to those improvements. And so we just need to be honest with the public about, if we're going to do a widening project, what are the negative impacts to the community going to be as well? Next slide. So thankfully, there's some solutions that we have now as a tool. Vision Zero is one of them. The other is the safe system approach that Federal Highway put out. When I was at the City of Orlando, we developed a Vision Zero action plan. Next slide. And this just tells the difference in how we've been doing things. In the engineering world, we've been talking about, well, we need to meet the design standards for improved safety, and I'm going to explain why that doesn't work. And so the Vision Zero is really the approach that we need to take to really improve safety in a meaningful way. Next slide. Safe System, Federal Highway got on board a few years after Vision Zero, and thankfully they've been providing funding across the country for local governments to develop safety action plans, which I'm hopeful we'll see some meaningful results in Florida as a result of this work. They've spent tens of millions of dollars just in the state of Florida, and they're also funding implementation for those locals who've already developed their action plan. Next slide. And it's very involved. When you develop a safety action plan, you really need to engage the community in a meaningful way. And you can see some images here from the work that we did at the City of Orlando, including bringing in emergency personnel. We found out that there were primary routes into our level 1 trauma center, and they had no preemption for the ambulances. So we were going to use our red light camera funds to fund preemption on that corridor so that we could get people more quickly to the trauma center. Next slide. And this is why the Safe System and Vision Zero approach has been successful in those countries that have taken it seriously. They've seen double-digit reductions in fatalities and serious injuries throughout their entire country. And these were all countries that were auto-dominant at one point in time. So it's not something that can be fixed just by the engineers. The one thing I would say that's missing from this is land development patterns. We've got to fix the land development patterns, which will improve safety and reduce VMT. Next slide. So I already talked enough about safe speeds, but safe speeds is critical to improving safety. And when people get concerned about speed management, the thing that I try to remind them of is think about the number of signals that you have to drive through on any given day and how much time you spend at a signal when there may not be anyone else around. So there's an issue with signal timing, obviously, but speed, we've got to work on managing speed, especially where we have a lot of pedestrian activity. Next slide. And you can see this is pretty self-evident. Next slide. So I put this in here primarily for engineers, but also for the general public. So normative safety is what we've been calling safety by meeting standards throughout my entire career. And what we found out back in '94, when I was at a national meeting where all the state roadway design engineers were, is that the standards are not based on safety research. They're based on maintaining the operating speed and capacity of the roadway. That was a life-changing discussion that we had there. And that's when I really started moving in the direction of focusing on safety, both at the DOT, the city of Orlando, and in my consultant roles. Substantive safety is when you get real safety, whether the standards are not met, whether or not the standards are met. So that could be example, what we call a yield street. I live on a yield street here in Tampa. I lived on one in Orlando. The street's so narrow that when a car is on one side, people have to take turns to get by. And that doesn't meet any AASHTO standards, but it definitely creates safety because it's a speed management tool. And then perceived safety, different people have different beliefs about what's safe and what's not safe. In District 1, we ran into a lot of resistance because as I was advocating for modern roundabouts, but many people have experience with traffic circles in the Northeast, which are not the same as a modern roundabout. Modern roundabouts are extremely safe and help to reduce congestion as well. So, but there's always that. This is change. I'm afraid of that. And so you have to educate the public on the benefits of modern roundabouts. Next slide. And I won't go into a lot of detail, but you can see that by having a modern roundabout compared with a conventional intersection, you're reducing the number of potential crash points by 24, and the types of crashes that you have with modern roundabouts are much less severe because you don't have the kinds of direct conflicts that you have with a conventional intersection. Next slide. And here's the data. I don't need to read this. You can see it. One thing that I would say that has become even more evident in my life, both at the city of Orlando, but also living in the West Coast, is when we had a tropical storm when I was at the city of Orlando, and half of our 600 signals were out due to loss of power. And we only had 45 generators. Over here in District 7, which is the Tampa district, they had over 900 signals out due to one of the most recent storms. And needless to say, they did not have enough generators to power up all those intersections. With modern roundabouts, whether there's power or not, they work. And again, they reduce safety, they reduce congestion and emissions. To me, they're one of the best tools that we have in the toolbox and are not used adequately. Next slide. So where do we go from here? If we want to reduce VMT, if we want to solve congestion, if we want to solve safety, we've got to work on land development patterns. And this is not new knowledge, it's just coming back into the fore. I'm very active in the Congress of the New Urbanism, have been for over 20 years, and this is something we've been advocating for ever since the Congress was founded. Next slide. And what does that look like? At DOT, I brought complete streets into the agency, and we went from a one-size-fits-all street design to designing the right street for the right place. So if we're in a rural context, which would be C1, and you can see as you go from left to right, the built environment gets more urban, the street or the roadway should be designed very differently than if you're in a C6. So what we did at DOT, we used a planning tool called the Transect and adapted it so that we could show engineers, okay, you're in a C4, you're in a more urban context, and the speeds need to be lower, the travel lanes can be narrower, and so we will have increased safety. Again, land development and transportation together are really necessary for this to be successful. Next slide. And you can see some of the other things that changed. Our minimum design speed was 40 miles an hour. You could have a 5 or a 6 foot sidewalk. That was it. You could have a 12-foot lane unless you could justify doing it other than that. And as a result of our change at DOT, you can now have a 10, 11, or 12-foot lane based on context, a 5, 6, 10, or 12-foot sidewalk, and target speeds as low as 25 miles an hour, which is much more appropriate for the urban environment. Whereas before it was 40, regardless of the built environment. And getting back to the land development patterns, having a dense gridded network of streets, small blocks, interconnectivity between adjacent land development patterns. And if we want real effective speed management, having buildings at the back of sidewalks and having on-street parking. On-street parking is one of the most effective tools we have for speed management. Next slide. A good example of that, and especially for those of you in the East Central Florida region, is Baldwin Park. I've taken a lot of people there, including a lot of engineers. This is an infill project that has a dense network of streets. You can see it has it's mixed use. It has all kinds of amenities. You could literally live there and never have to leave because everything that you need would be there. And there's significant variation in housing prices. So there's all types of housing types available, and it's all interconnected. They're not isolated into these silos. In addition, there's 32 street connections to the adjacent street networks. So there's no signals within Baldwin Park except at the elementary school. And really, there's never any congestion on any of their network because there's so many ways to get in and out of Baldwin Park. Next slide. So with that, we can achieve safe roads, we can achieve safe speeds, we can improve the quality of life and improve VMT. This is a project I worked on south of Tallahassee. It's a little community called Woodville. And people were driving through, well, I should say people drive through this neighborhood commuting back and forth to Tallahassee, going 50 and 60 miles an hour. And Woodville's a very small community, but even at the elementary school, which is right on this highway, even when the school crossing guards are out in the street, people continue to go past them until someone will finally stop to let the kids get across the street. So they asked us, what can we do to help to reduce the speeds through Woodville? So next slide. Obviously, having sidewalks would be tremendously helpful because there were none. And having marked crosswalks also will help, although every intersection is a legal crosswalk, which most people don't understand. And obviously, putting street trees in helps with shade. It won't do a whole lot to slow people down. You really need buildings at the back of sidewalk with on-street parking. And that's why I say that land use and transportation have to be integrated in a way that creates this outcome and will also help to reduce vehicle miles traveled because now people can walk to get their needs met. They don't have to depend on a car for every single thing. And those are the types of communities I've been living in for the last 30 years or so. So with that, let's go to the next slide. And I think we're ready to transition over to someone else.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Billy. If you have any questions for Billy, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will answer them shortly after the other two presentations. All right, so next slide, please. As I previously introduced myself, I'm Sarah Crom. I'm the Senior Transportation Planner for the Space Coast Transportation Planning Organization. I'm going to be discussing smarter connections, prioritizing multimodal transportation through data. So taking some of those elements that Billy provided and thinking about Vision Zero and other ways to plan and develop for smarter, healthier, and a reduction of VMT in your communities and showing some examples of ways that at the Space Coast TPO we use data to help us make those decisions. Next slide. So, who is the Space Coast TPO? So, Space Coast TPO is a regional entity, and we continually monitor the conditions of all of the transportation modes. So, we work with one county, 16 cities and towns, two airports, a seaport, and a spaceport. We carry out planning at a regional and long-term level, and we ensure that our citizens, our local governments, transportation agencies, and elected officials have a seat at that table. Next slide. So, what part of what we do is we try to get all of the modes together and all of them to work together. And so we're thinking about passenger rail, transit, space, seaports, airports, as well as also reducing VMT through adding bicycle and pedestrian facilities and also considering how we can plan our streets smarter and safer. Next slide. So the importance of data-based decisions. We need to ensure that we are making our decisions based on data and not necessarily what is the most comfy for people. You know, as Billy mentioned, this change can be hard, but change is also what is going to, drive our economy and our safety and able to really help us grow a safer community. So, data-based decisions help planners understand the needs and the future needs. They ensure that our investments are effective and meet the needs of the community, as well as also they're ensuring that planning agencies, such as the Transportation Planning Organization, are demonstrating transparency and accountability to our citizens, our committees and boards, as well as also our elected officials. Next slide. So some project examples that the Space Coast TPO has had, next slide, are the first one I'd like to discuss, the Space Coast TPO Vision Zero. I know Billy already went over a lot of this, so I'm not going to dive deep into it, but essentially Vision Zero is a strategy to eliminate traffic fatalities and switching from thinking of traffic fatalities as accidents and into thinking them as crashes and considering how can we work as a system to help achieve Vision Zero. Next slide. So the Space Coast TPO committed to a goal to reach Vision Zero by 2050 in our most recent action plan. Next slide. And why did we do this? Well, 2,744 people died or were seriously injured on our roadways from 2018 to 2022. To put that in perspective, one cruise ship used to carry about 3,000. Now, we're getting bigger and bigger and bigger cruise ships, but basically, from in a 5-year period, we are killing a whole cruise ship worth of individuals, and that is unacceptable. Now, luckily, we're not in this alone. We have every single one of our cities and towns and the county have committed to working with us on Vision Zero, as well as also the Brevard County Public School System. Next slide. So, Vision Zero wasn't something new. This wasn't, it just was rebranded. We had been working towards safety efforts for a very long time. We had a complete streets program that was very successful, where we were able to help municipalities develop streets into thinking about every single mode of transportation. So rather than these streets being car oriented, they were oriented to be more walkable, bikeable, safer for all of the road users. Some other TPO projects that we've conducted that to help us support Vision Zero are multiple corridor studies. We've developed a bicycle and pedestrian master plan, as well as also working on safe routes to school projects. Next slide. So understanding the data is really key in properly planning for Vision Zero and safety. So we need to consider when and why are crashes happening. And as you'll see that, there's definitely, we live in a very car-centric environment. So a lot of our crashes are happening with people and vehicles. However, we are seeing that we do have a fair amount of people walking and biking that are also experiencing crashes. Next slide. So we also want to look at where our crash is happening. So not just when, not just why, but where, so that we can target certain areas in order to make improvements. And so we have developed a high injury network, and this shows us where all of the fatal and serious injuries happened within a 5-year time period. Excuse me. And we can also break that down by mode. And so we can start to see trends of if a roadway is unsafe for bicyclists or pedestrians, then clearly we need to consider how can we make that roadway safer for those vulnerable road users. If we're seeing more motorcycle and vehicle crashes, well, what are the crash types? Are they speed related? Which most of the time they are speed related? Or are there other incidents going on, such as lane departures, where people are driving at night and there's a dangerous curve and they're leaving the roadway. So we can really start to dig in and use data to show the trends to know where we should invest. Next slide. So with our high entry network, we then overlaid our high entry network with projects that we had already committed into action plans or through corridor studies or road safety audits that we've already put investment into. And so we overlaid the high entry network with those projects, and we were able to figure out some targeted safety corridors. I don't want to call them low-hanging fruit, but they were projects that already had some work put into them and on the planning side. And from those targeted safety corridors, we were able to, next slide, then pursue two grant opportunities. The first one was the Safe Streets for All, and so we were able to help the city of Palm Bay um, receive 2,400,000 in federal funding towards a basically developing Emerson Drive, which is a highly active bicycle and pedestrian corridor. It has two major elementary schools on it. It crosses through areas of, large transportation disadvantaged populations. It has a park. And so we were able to basically help them secure funding through using data and considering where investments should be going into helping them develop the street into more of a complete street. Next slide. Another project that we were able to secure is a rail crossing elimination grant for 4.9 million. So this is once again leveraging data and local funds into getting federal funds into our community to make our transportation system safer. Now, while it's called a rail crossing elimination grant, we aren't eliminating any crossings, but rather we're improving 7 highway railroad grade crossings with 15 new exit gates and 2 medians. This should reduce loss of life, reduce potential collisions, and improve the crossings where people can't be going around the exit gates. Next slide. So then moving off of Vision Zero, some two other projects that we've worked on have very similar data sets that I'm going to quickly walk through that have helped us better plan our transportation system and improve it for reduction in vehicle miles traveled. So our Southern Brevard Trails Master Plan basically sought to create a sub-area master plan to complement our bicycle and pedestrian master plan. And we wanted to build off of our Showcase Trail Network, Sun Trail Network, as well as also the local trails within the nature sanctuaries. Next slide. So we wanted to take a step back and think about our trail system, not just for recreation or exercise, but as a true transportation, excuse me, as true transportation infrastructure. So we developed an active transportation propensity index that essentially looked at land use, demographics, and transportation data to consider where is the biggest need for trails within the Southern Brevard area. Next slide. And what we ended up coming up with is this very interesting kind of honeycomb hexagonal map where it was showing which areas really cross all three of those emphasis areas and where most likely people would need and or use a trail system to get out of their vehicle, into their bicycle, or walking to their destinations. Next slide. So we then overlaid that with the current trails that are available, as well as also the currently planned trails. And what we started to see is that by looking at the data and by looking at our current trail network, we definitely have some gaps in our system in those areas that are ranked very high for an active transportation score. And so what we did, next slide, is start to build out a network that did address those needs, as well as also coordinating with our public, our city officials, um, community advocates, bicyclists in the area to figure out where are they wanting to walk and bike, along with the data that's showing us that these are areas that would be wonderful for active transportation. So we've now been able to build out a network that is addressing the active transportation propensity index. Next slide. So on that same note, we also have done a very similar analysis, but flipping it into discussing mobility on demand. And I really want to use this presentation to also introduce our next presenter. So I'm going to glaze over some of these slides as Ralph is going to be diving into a mobility on demand project that is on the ground. So before you can start a mobility on demand project, you obviously need to identify and figure out what does your mobility on demand program look like. And so we have been working on a mobility on demand analysis. And mobility on demand, for those not familiar, it's an on-demand service that typically use smaller vehicles, so not your giant buses that can't go into those small neighborhood streets that Billy was talking about. It's typically app-based and it's within a defined zone. And so really what we wanted to do is we wanted to use data and discussions with our communities to figure out what zones should we be pursuing for mobility on demand. Next slide. And we're going to skip this one because Ralph is going to dive deeper into how to use it. So as I already mentioned, what we wanted to do is we really wanted to identify mobility on demand zones, as well as also coordinating with our local agencies. And eventually what we want to get to is actually developing a pilot project to implement, which Votran has done a wonderful job at implementing their MOD, as you'll see. Next slide. So we wanted to think about this as linking transportation and land use, multimodal options, and then of course considering sustainability and resiliency. Next slide. And so we developed a very similar methodology as what you saw with the Southern Brevard Trails Master Plan, but we tweaked what the data was that we were, sticking into these honeycomb maps in order to switch from thinking of active transportation of bicycling and walking, but rather where is it suitable for a mobility on demand transit type service? And so we considered population employment density, intersection density, transit ridership and service gaps, and transportation disadvantaged areas. Next slide. So I'm just going to briefly walk through some of the data sets. And so when we were thinking about population density, we wanted to think about where are their high population density, because we want to develop a MOD that is going to be serving the most number of people to develop the most number of trips possible. And so we were able to start seeing where our very high density populations were. Next slide. And then we also wanted to consider employment density, helping individuals that may not have access to a vehicle get to and from their job, or maybe it's that individual that wants to get out of their single occupancy vehicle to, reduce their VMTs or to reduce their gas prices or any number of things. And so we were also able to start seeing where those high employment areas were. Next slide. And then we wanted to consider intersections. And this really shows that, basically you need a high intersection area in order to have areas for your MOD vehicles to stop and also generally you have more intersections where there are more activity centers and such. Next slide. And then we wanted to consider transit riderships. We didn't want to, um, scavenge from the Space Coast Area Transit's fixed route service and take away fixed route riders, but rather complement the fixed route system with the MOD. Next slide. And then we also overlaid equity, typically what we were looking at is households with zero vehicles, households with someone over the age of 60 or under the age of 18. Basically thinking about the different populations that typically wouldn't be a driver or wouldn't have the means to get into their vehicle and drive. So next slide. And so what we were able to do is develop a suitability map. And as I mentioned, it does have that kind of honeycomb layers. And so we're starting to see these pockets of dark purple. And so we zoomed in on what areas seem to be the most suitable based on the data. Next slide. We then set about prioritizing those zones and considering transportation disadvantaged populations, land use, multimodality, and resiliency. Next slide. And what we came up with is actually a lot of the zones ranked very similar because we had already put all of that data and footwork into the suitability analysis, that really they all were pretty much all ranking within the same prioritization bubble as each other. And so, we hope to take one of these zones and develop an MOD service pilot, which I will now turn our webinar over to Ralph to show you what a MOD project actually looks like on the ground.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Good morning. My name is Ralph Hessler, Transit Planning Manager from Volusia County, and I would like to speak to you about our MOD project. So, next slide. We'll start off, what is mobility on demand? We call it MOD. It is also called microtransit. Some areas, it's the same animal by just a different name. It is an integrated and connected multimodal network of safe, affordable, and reliable transportation options that is available and accessible to all travelers. Again, combines traditional public transportation with private enterprise, as we chose to do, options into a single mobility service. The MOD is traveler focused, putting more weight on personal choice, trip satisfaction, and the efficient delivery of services. It combines all of these mobility services, combining rather all these mobility services fills the gaps in the current transportation offerings, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, to allow true, complete point-to-point trips for everyone. Next slide. So the benefits of MOD, it's cost effective, smaller vehicles and only operate when needed. So for instance, right now, if you have a large fixed route bus that drives up and down the street, it drives up and down the street all day long, hour after hour. Hopefully people use it and they get on and so on. But if not, right, you have what's considered a low performing route. Maybe nobody uses it at certain periods of the day, and it costs you all this money to operate. Whereas here, when you have an MOD, it only goes out when it needs to go out, right? And we'll talk about how you can schedule that trip. It provides coverage to low demand areas and reallocates resources to high demand areas. So a little background on this, one of the reasons why we started this is because after COVID, like many other transit entities and other businesses, we couldn't get employees, right? People just don't come to work anymore. I've yet to figure out what they do. I'd like to be able to do that myself, but they don't come to work. So we really struggled with being able to put enough drivers and vehicles out on the street. So that was a problem. Also, some of our routes, specifically on the west side of the county, some of them were low performing. One reason for that is some routes only went every 2 hours. So of course, if it doesn't travel when you need to travel, that doesn't do you any good. As was mentioned before, some of the communities are not very well suited for larger vehicles to go up and down the streets or into certain areas. So that was a problem. So we were limited to where we could travel. The ADA corridor is 3/4 of a mile off a fixed route, but the average person will walk up to about a half a mile to get to a bus. But we have so many areas that are far beyond that. So those people really didn't get any transportation at all. Here, staffing relief, as I mentioned before, because we have a private contractor, provides this service for us so that we were able to take the drivers that we had and the low performing routes and put them into other areas where we needed more service or higher frequency. Ultimately, this resulted in a better service to the public because more people getting rides that didn't have it before. And ride sharing, so these are not single trips. It's designed to be a ride sharing. It could pick up a single person, but it also could pick up 2, 3, 4 people at a time in a similar area going into a similar direction. That equals less vehicles, right? Instead of 4 people taking their individual car, we could have 2, 3, or 4 taking one vehicle, which is less traffic congestion, as was mentioned before, which equals less vehicle miles traveled. And ultimately, that also is better for less accidents because you have less vehicles on the road. Next slide. So where and why did we do this? As I mentioned before, click again. So this is a map of the west side of our county. The framework there, you can see the DeLand area, and that's one zone, and the next zone is Orange City, DeBarry, and Deltona. The squiggly lines all in between were the bus routes that we had before. So if you look in that Deltona area, those routes kind of weaved in and out of the streets where they were able to. Those are some of the major roads. And so the service there was as frequent as it could be because it's basically a residential area, not much businesses going on there. And so our ridership was very low. Again, two of those routes and it only came every 2 hours. So that was not the best thing. And then on top of that, we didn't have enough staff consistently to be able to run those routes as we'd like to have run them. So we decided to look into options to provide a better service there, which led us into the MOD. We weren't the first to do it in the state. Others did it. We did learn from others. We went and visited them. We looked at their model, see how they did it, and we tailored their success stories into what became our success story. Next slide. So how to begin? And here, so we identified the needs. As I said before, we had low performing routes. Part of this plan, our model is to also look at first mile, last mile connectivity and new services areas. So what I mean by first mile, last mile, and I'll get to that in a little bit. Some of the routes we kept in place, and the idea is to take the MOD to the fixed route bus if you're going a longer distance. If that really works, the software is very intuitive. It knows our bus schedules and it tries to connect you with the bus if that makes sense, if it's the most effective and efficient way to travel. Otherwise, it will take you point to point, or if the bus doesn't go there anywhere near there, it will take you point to point. So we offer free transfers to and from the MOD to the bus to make that more appealing for people to use that. Again, we go into new service areas because it could go all over the west side of the county, which the fixed route could not do. We employed the services of a consultant who has lots of experience in setting these things up. They did our data, as Sarah talked about, that a lot of data in the background. They looked at the areas where there were businesses, where there were high density housing, where there were origin destinations, hospitals, train stations, things of that nature. They looked at potential paratransit customers that could migrate over and use this service. And they put a plan together for us that we use and then tweaked it a little bit to kind of fit what we wanted to have. Additionally, we had to identify funding, right? Nothing is free. And we had then a choice whether to use in-house resources or contract resources. We chose to do 100% turnkey as a contracted service. We just pay the bill and they provide the service. They provide the operators. They provide everything for us, as well as the software to do the scheduling and the customer service. Next slide. So how does it work? So the company that we use is called VIA. We tagged it as VoRide so people know what it is. They provide the scheduling software. It's free to download and you can do that. And it's you plug in your basic information, identifies who you are, then you become a client, and you can schedule your trips that way. You can also schedule them via a telephone. You know, some folks, sort of like my dad as an example, I use him, you know, he's 84, I love him to death, but he and software are like, you know, oil and water. It's just never going to mix. He would rather make a phone call, and many people are like that. The system routes nearby vehicles because the vehicles are moving around. It will find the closest vehicle based on your trip request, and it tries to put the two together, and it'll tell you, okay, this is where you need to be. I want to add to this that we designed the system to be point to point. So that would mean curb to curb. It is for wheelchair accessible folks or people that need a little extra help. We can do door to door, but basically it's going to be curb to curb within reason. Maybe to have you walk down the street to the next closest corner or somewhere like that, because that keeps it more efficient and effective. If it has to start meandering down little side streets and all of that, that really ties up the system. It will do that if necessary, but we do try to avoid that when possible. Although I just want to add, we make all of the connection points very safe. As I said before, sometimes it will connect with a bus. We don't just drop you at some random corner somewhere and just say, wait for the bus. We have selected spots where we know they're open, they're safe. The bus obviously stops there. The VoRide vehicle can stop there safely, maybe come off the road. Maybe it's a parking lot or something like that. So we do try to keep the customer safety and sensitivity in mind when we do this thing. As I said before, this is also a ride sharing program, so you might get the only person being picked up and dropped off, or along the way, within a certain reason, it might pick up one or two or three other folks as well. The system continuously monitors ride requests and routing to keep it as efficient and as effective as possible. Most of the requests can be fulfilled within 30 minutes or a little bit less. Next slide. So here is now that map again, and you can see when I said before that what we tried to do, we left two routes from what was originally. There's a north-south route that goes all the way from pretty high up in DeLand, and it goes all the way down to DeBarry and meet the Sunrail train that's there. So the VORIDE can connect with those. And then there's an east-west route that goes from the Deltona area that also connects down into DeBarry. So along the way there, the VORIDE can connect and makes a more efficient system when that works the best for the customer. And other than that, if it can't connect with it, will take you then point to point. Next slide. So funding, right? We have to find money for this thing. There are various ways that you can fund this, the capital cost of contracting, right? Because you have to operate the system. So for us, it worked very well. We use some of our 5307 urbanized formula funding to pay for this thing. We also use a little bit of 5310 from the state and 5311 money, as you can see there, what they're dedicated to. So if you're thinking about doing this program, you could reach out to both the FTA and FDOT and see if those fundings are available. There are other options as well by the Commission for Transportation Disadvantaged, the CTD. They have Innovative Service Development Program. That's a competitive grant that you could put in for that. Maybe you'll be able to get that. Also, FDOT offers service development grants, and those are also competitive, but possibly you might be able to get that as well if you can write a good story and it works out very well. So next slide. So the fares, talk a little bit about the fare. So our current fixed route fare is $2 and our paratransit fare is $3.50. I put that paratransit fare in there because, again, we do try to migrate some folks to come from our paratransit service to use this as well. So you can see for them, it's definitely an advantage because the VORIDE is a $2 base fare for the first 5 miles. It is $1 each additional mile up to a maximum of 10 miles. So you're going to pay $7 to go 10 miles. I will tell you that's better than any taxi that you can get right now. Not to put them down or belittle them. This is just a different service that we offer, and we could keep it this low because it is subsidized. Taxis are not. But it is there as an option for people to use. We do not currently provide trips over 10 miles. If you're going further, we will try to connect you with the fixed route. As I mentioned before, it's a free transfer to or from the fixed route. So that makes it more efficient because if we have to go more than 10 miles, you're taking one vehicle far out of the way, and that reduces the amount of availability for somebody else trying to get a trip. Next slide. So the bottom line of all of this, right? So when we looked at this thing, our fixed route in the paratransit services in the west side of the county was approximately $3 million a year. The VORIDE service in that same area, as you can see, started off as approximately $2.1 million. Easy math tells you that right off the bat, we saved $900,000, which was very appealing to the county leadership. The fixed route ridership prior to putting the VORIDE in service, VORIDE has been around for about a year and a half now. We had almost 215,000 trips per year that we provided on the fixed route. Once we implemented the full year of the VORIDE, the fixed route ridership went down about 196,000. One might say, well, you lost some because we replaced some of the routes. They went away and was replaced with the VORIDE. However, as you can see, the VORIDE constituted 71,000 trips in that same period. And just as a side note, we just topped 100,000 rides on the VORIDE. So when you combine the fixed route and the VORIDE together, that's almost 267,000 rides. That's an increase in that community, that whole area of 24% ridership increase, which is absolutely wonderful, I think, for any transit agency to do. So you could see how the two pieces work together, right? The VORIDE and the fixed route together provides a better service. It's more effective and efficient for both the customer and for, of course, county saving. It also provides, because there are ultimately less vehicles on the roads, so more traffic safety. We go into communities that we couldn't do before, so it's better for the customer there as well. And less vehicle miles traveled, which equates to safety and better communities. less carbon, less just pollution and all of those other things, if that is something that concerns you. So next slide. So I thank you very much for listening to me, and afterwards be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ralph. So, as I mentioned previously, there we have some questions in the map, and I mean, excuse me, not in the map, questions in the chat. But then also, if you have any other questions, please feel free to put those in as we go through and answer the questions. I'd also like to let you know that this webinar series isn't over. There's an amazing webinar set up for May 8th called Fueling the Future, Alternative Fuel Success Stories, and I would encourage you to register to attend that webinar as well. So, Billy and Ralph, there are a couple questions already in the chat. The first one comes from Jennifer, and it's Vision Zero seems to change the focus on people in the system versus car-centric approach. Is this trend continuing and widely adopted today? Can you provide examples where the people-first approach is being implemented?
So I responded in the chat already. As far as locations, um, there the one I'm most familiar with that has been implemented, it was actually done by District 5, is on Orange Blossom Trail south of downtown, where that was on our high entry network when I was at the city, and we were having lots of crashes every month and multiple fatalities during the year. And the DOT put in race crosswalks, put in special pedestrian signal features, and did some other treatments. And then I guess it's been almost 2 years now that's been in place. They have not had a pedestrian crash since, but that's one of very few that actually have been implemented. The funding from Federal Highway for implementation is just now in the process of being implemented, is from what I understand. So I don't know of any other examples yet. Sarah.
Thank you, Billy. Yes, I would echo that, implementation takes a very, very long time when it comes to transportation projects.
Yeah.
So while, personally, Space Coast TPO has several projects kind of in the queue for funding, and then of course the Emerson Road project that I mentioned previously. We have another question from Lisa. What can citizens do to encourage municipalities to do this smart planning? Which Billy in the chat did already mention, that getting involved with your local TPOs and MPOs. Are there other areas that you feel either Ralph or Billy or both, on ways that, citizens can get engaged with planning?
Well, to deal with the land use issue, you really have to go to the local governments themselves, because while the MPOs and TPOs can provide some recommendations and guidance, it's actually the local governments that do that change. I'm working with the city of Sarasota right now, and they have two corridors that they want to be more multimodal. One is US 41 north of downtown, which I actually worked with them on when I was the district secretary, to replace all their signalized intersections with modern roundabouts. And they're also working on changing the land development patterns to make that corridor more urban. And they're also doing another corridor called Fruitville Road. So they've actually taken their land development regulations, fixed their land development regulations from a suburban sprawl pattern to more urban. And so that's by getting involved with your local government, that's how that can be done.
All right. So we have Dawn who asked, will these slides be available to attendees? And Marie, will you be sending the slides out?
Sure, I can send a copy of the slides to everyone who is attending today.
Thank you. And then he also had, is a condensed area road network more conducive to utilization of the MOD? Ralph?
Well, I would say yes. It is. The only thing I want to add to that is, as I said before, what we tried to do is marry a good corridor for our fixed route with the MOD. If you have a community where it starts to design or expand, and they could have areas that are conducive to making connections there. As I said before, it's nice. You don't want to just drop somebody just randomly at a curb somewhere and not see how to figure out. But if I can make an example, we are looking at on the west side of the county creating a new park and ride facility. And in that, there'll be buses there, there'll be cars parked. But in that design, we are already incorporating an area where the MOD vehicles can move and can go in there and pick up and drop off passengers and wait for them and all of that. So that, looking at MOD as really a part of what we think is going to be the fabric of public transportation going forward. It's more than just fixed route and train and paratransit. We believe strongly that this will be that fourth component to kind of marry those pieces together a little bit more than just a regular taxi, right? So.
Yes, and I would echo as well that, with our MOD analysis, we definitely considered those more condensed area roadway networks, which is one of the reasons why we considered density of intersections um, in our analysis. So, I don't have any questions from the attendees, but I do have a couple of questions to help lead the conversation. So what policies are needed to ensure that our communities develop mobility options and services, as well as pursue a reduction in VMT? So any recommendations for various policies?
Fixing land development regulations is the biggest, requiring connectivity between adjacent developments. I mean, I could go on, but that's the biggest challenge because the transportation tends to follow the land development patterns.
Are there any really great recommendations that you have of a land development code or someone who's just doing it right that would help our local governments be able to fix their land development policies?
Yes, the Congress for the New Urbanism form-based codes, which follow this pattern, and the Congress has been a leader in this area for over 20 years. So that's the best example that I can think of a offhand, and they've been implemented all over the country with communities that are wanting things different than what they've been doing from a suburban sprawl standpoint. And that's what the city of Sarasota is doing. And that's right in line with the graphic I showed earlier with the various context classifications. It helps to provide some guidance. There is an actual document that DOT provides called the Context Classification Guide. The cover was on that image, and that's right in line with form-based codes.
Ralph, were there any policies that you'd like to discuss as
Well,
well?
yeah, what I'd like to say is so, I've been in counties and cities a long, long time, and we have these, as was just mentioned, Billy mentioned, they have these codes, these requirements that, when new development or change in development is going to happen, it goes through this process, and one of which is that for us, like it comes into transit, and they say, well, we're going to make this new community. And the policy says that we have to have space for a transit thing. Well, that's great. It starts off good. What we would look for is to have some real firepower behind that because all too often what happens is the developer goes back to the elected entity and almost tries to override that. And they're like, well, this community that we're making here is never really going to be transit users. Well, maybe not fixed route per se today, but, again, MOD, which will be a great thing. But the other thing is that the transit component needs to carry as much weight as the other parts, right? And that has to start at the top level as well. Additionally, sometimes what happens is they say, okay, well, we're going to give you a little transit space. We're going to give you this one little spot in an area where you can put a bus stop, which is in the furthest part away, out of sight, out of mind from everyone. It's really useless. It's just really something that's on paper, does no value for us now or later. So if this policy can have a little bit more meat to it and strength to it, where I think transit as a whole can be a bigger player and have a greater voice, I think we could get more done. Not saying that we want to build a transit facility in the middle of somebody's community, but it doesn't make any sense to have something that is useless, right? So the policy is there, but we don't want it to be empty words.
It's really truly taking those developments and thinking about the citizens that are living in those developments as car ride or drivers, transit riders, bicyclists, pedestrians, and not just sticking them in one box.
Yeah.
Awesome. So how did you engage the community and stakeholders when you were developing any of the projects or programs that you mentioned today?
So I've been involved with master planning with new urbanists for gosh, almost 20, probably 15 years now. And so part of what's done through the charrette process is you do week-long workshops and try to get as many people into the workshops as possible to help so they can help define the communities that they live in. And I've been involved with those both greenfield projects, but also redevelop. A lot of what I've been involved with is redevelopment, and you hear loud and clear from the public what concerns they have about the road network, whether it's one-way streets or the streets are too wide or we have no sidewalks. I'm also involved with Blue Zones, and they're another organization that advocates for change in the way development patterns are being created to improve health outcomes for the people that live in those areas.
Yeah, for us, it's a few things. So first of all, we'll start on paper. And I know, Sarah, you'll be familiar with this. We have the Transportation Development Plan, right? That is put on paper each year. It's a multi-year plan. The end result of it gets adopted by, the elected officials. Hopefully they read through it and they see what's in there. And in that, each year, it talks about finding new ways to provide better transportation options. In the last one that we had, they did already touch upon the MOD because as I said earlier, that's not a new thing anywhere in the state or around the country. So they said, oh, there's something we should look at. And we took that to heart. Additionally, in our Transportation Disadvantaged Service Plan, which is sort of a sister to the TDP, it does always refer to, can we find other options to provide more more travel availability for those clientele. So we have that as well. With that, we have, of course, the TPO meetings where these things are discussed and is open to the public. They're also, online as well. We have the Transportation Disadvantaged Local Coordinating Board. So those things are discussed there also. When we decided to do the MOD, we went and had several public meetings on the west side of the county because that's where the service was going to be. And we told the people, hey, we're thinking about this might be coming. What do you think? So they gave us quite a bit of feedback. Some, on a couple of the meetings, some elected officials did show up to kind of hear what the public was saying as well. Afterwards, we briefed the elected officials on the results of those meetings. And then, of course, then there were the formal public meetings at the county level where people had an opportunity to weigh in as well. And we even had virtual meetings before the MOD rollout to get feedback, plus or minus because some people they thought that they wouldn't like it because it kind of scared them a little bit. I'm going to lose my bus route. How am I going to do this? I'm not familiar with scheduling things, but it just took some time. We worked with the folks as well, the people that were going to be where the service was changed in their areas. We rode on the buses. We met the people. We talked to them. We were at transfer points and met them. So we really did a lot of face-to-face and electronic and media outreach to get this program, to get the feedback and to roll it out.
Sarah, you're muted.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for answering the question. I'll answer the question as well. And so at the Space Coast TPO, we do strive to engage with our citizens consistently and collaboratively throughout all of our projects and programs and throughout, every day of us being available to help our citizens. So we do that through public workshops, open houses. We have had some virtual webinars. We just did several of those for some trail projects. As well as also, as Ralph already mentioned, citizens can show up at the TPO board. They can get involved with the citizen advisory um, committee, or show up for the TDLCB meetings and other meetings and programs that we're conducting. We also have a really robust social media program, and so that's another way that we can engage and get feedback. So, next question. Looking ahead 5 to 10 years, what emerging technologies or trends do you believe will have the most significant impact on our ability to reduce vehicle miles traveled and increase mobility?
All right, I'll take the first stab at this. We are already planning a continued rollout of our MOD. We're looking at other areas. So currently we're only on the west side, but now we're looking at on the east side of our county, which is very densely populated, and that's where most of our fixed route service is. However, there's a couple small pockets there that we say, maybe these are ripe for MOD, and we can replace either part of the fixed route service that we also offer in some areas, what we call a flex service, which is a deviated fixed route, to replace that because it's more cost effective. Just as an example, it costs us $93 an hour to run one fixed route. It costs $34 an hour to provide the MOD. So it's a cost saving there. And we could expand into bigger areas. We are also considering some of our night service where, the ridership goes down quite a bit, and maybe we could replace some of that with the MOD. So we, here for our area, are seeing a definite expansion to the MOD as well. It would be nice if rail service would ever come this way. I just don't have, based on the way things are right now, not only financially, but just land use and all of that, I don't know that it'll happen in my lifetime here, but it doesn't mean that it'll never happen. But that would be great if that were to happen, or even some variation of that, like a lighter rail type thing, maybe, that we can definitely see that to be the case. And the last thing that we see for our area is we would like to implement a little bit more express bus service to come directly from the east side, go right to the west side, maybe, one or two stops along the way. Because right now we only offer one route that does that, and that's heavily used, and that's only on the north side, going between east and west. We have nothing on the south side. So that would connect people with the current Sunrail, right? So that would help a lot, and we think that would, again, less vehicle miles traveled, right? So currently, right now, all these people have to drive their car from here to there. Maybe if we put 10, 12, 30 of those on an express bus that gets them there, that would help a lot. So that's what we see in our future.
Billy, any trends or technologies you'd like to mention?
Nope, I don't see much in the way of technology helping this problem.
I think
E-bikes and scooters are helping, but that's
um
you're still using the road.
yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think that there are some, new technologies such as PedSafe, that are coming out in the intelligent transportation, realm that could potentially help use technology to help make our streets safer, by, optimizing warnings that there are pedestrians in the crosswalk, and, better communication to the drivers of bicyclists and pedestrians in their area. So I think, there is the potential of some technologies. But I want to shift gears and thank our speakers for their wonderful insight into planning better, safer, and more multimodal communities. And just commend you for all of the amazing work that both of you have done to help Florida grow, in a multimodal and safe way. And so thank you so much to both Ralph and Billy. I'd also like to mention that, Adrian has dropped the Climate Action Plan, Sustainable Communities, and Transportation Strategies, action draft that is now open for review and comment in the chat. So I would like to encourage you to check that out and engage with the East Central Florida Regional Resilience Collaborative on their action plan, as well as also encourage you to attend on May 8th, Fueling the Future, Alternative Fuel Success Stories. This will be a wonderful panel. really engage and discuss alternative fuels such as CNG, LNG. It's really amazing what some of these folks are doing. So with that, I'd once again like to thank you for attending and hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.